In this video, I'm going to share with you exactly a process you can implement into your business that's going to allow you to never run out of qualified lead flow. Now, I see this a lot in our space, especially nowadays in this market where a lot of brands and a lot of creators are struggling to scrape the bottom of the barrel every single month to get just enough leads to probably make the same amount as they did the month before, or maybe even less. And that's usually a sign of a declining business. Now, the process I'm going to share with you, we've implemented over the last 6 years, and it's driven over 60 million in revenue to date across a lot of brands and creators we've worked with. Now, the good thing is this isn't one of those processes that's a tactic or a hack that's going to keep you afloat for a couple months and then you're back into the same position as you were before. This is one of those things that if you implement, it'll be able to bring you a long-lasting business that you'll be able to grow year over year done correctly. So, without further ado, let's dive into it. So diving right into it, the first thing I want to talk about before we get into the fun stuff is understanding a bit more about market cycles and how they work, right? An example of a market cycle is if you look at, from 2020 to, I'd say 2023, that was one wave of a market cycle, right? It was COVID. A lot more people were at home. There were more demand for digital products and people having more free time on their hand. There wasn't also as much saturation as there is right now, right? So relatively to 2025 and 2024, it was an easier market to sell into, right? A simple paid VSL call booking funnel could easily, help you scale to, those 500,000 plus month per marks, right? Doing that in this market condition is a lot tougher. Still possible, but acquisition cost is going to be a lot higher for most people. And also there's just so much saturation around this funnel alone. It requires a lot more to sell to someone in 2025. And a lot of that is because there was so much selling done in this period that, usually the most ideal current buyer is kind of desensitized to, buying more digital products. So there's an issue of trust everywhere, right? And there's two ways, and we'll dive into this a little bit more, but there's two ways to build trust. Either it's with time or it's with money, someone paying you. We'll talk about that more in a second. However, that point is right now, we're in a place where what used to look something like this, now it takes the ideal person to probably find you on YouTube first or Instagram or whatever social channels you're on. They'll probably join your newsletter or they'll try to join some sort of your ecosystem. Maybe they'll watch more of your content. That might take them a few weeks to build trust and align with who you are. Maybe they join one of your low ticket products if you have any. And then maybe they decide to book a call for a high ticket product and then they eventually convert. The point I'm trying to make here is that what used to be a sales conversion cycle of maybe within 30 days is now a lot longer. It might be 90 days. It'll be different for everyone. We'll talk about more about this in depth in just a second, but everyone has different conversion cycles. As a business, you want to identify how long does it take a person to go from a lead to a customer. In this situation, more so for a higher ticket kind of program, right? Now, bringing us back down here a little bit, we want to try to build a business that's designed to withstand markets. The definition of that, and breaking that down into a little bit more simpler terms, is that I've noticed with a lot of brands and clients that we've worked with that the ones that were able to withstand these market cycles, while they were in 2023 and between 2020 to 2023, they knew that this market cycle was going to shift. They knew that stuff was going to happen where eventually this, graph that's going upwards to the right with sales is eventually going to have some sort of plateau. That's just the nature of business. It's the universal law, right? Now, the best businesses are the ones that prepare for the punch that they least expect to come. And so a lot of these businesses knew that forthcoming. So they either triple down on content, or they knew that they're going to need to get away from paid acquisition. So they're going to have to go heavier on YouTube, which was like a big trend and it still is right now, for example. But a lot of those businesses were prepared for those moments. Now, the problem is when you're not prepared for those moments, the thing is you might take actions on things that you think might work because you're accustomed to a different market. And when you try to cross that over to a newer market, it's just not going to work. So similarly to the stock market, when people see a lot of, the market dumping and people have more of this panic selling happening, that's the same thing that usually business owners do when they face the same situation, right? When they start seeing a decline, they start making these desperate moves or take these desperate measures to try to accumulate the same number of sales they had the month before, right? And so trying to recoup that P&L and trying to make that P&L the same as it once used to be, isn't always realistic. So sometimes you'll have to make some moves that don't look the prettiest on the balance sheet. You might have to regress a little bit before you can, move up the ladder again. But, what I've noticed is majority of the time, most business owners don't do that and they keep pushing their heels in deeper. And that usually doesn't allow them to preserve their business. And then fast forward a bit, maybe a year or two later, they might not be around, or they might have a smaller market share because they didn't adapt quick enough, or they took some desperate measures that didn't work out in their favor, right? Sometimes it might, but most of the times it usually doesn't, right? So the best thing that we want to do is preserve our business in these tougher market cycles, because sometimes it's just an era where you got to survive that market, right? It's going to be a tougher market than others. Some markets are going to be, better than others, and you want to be prepared for those markets to maximize when most of the competition maybe isn't relevant or around anymore, right? So that's the first thing. Now, diving the second part of this and breaking this down a little bit further, well, how do we put all of this into action, right? Like, what does this mean when it comes to applying this to our business, right? And the first thing I'll say is that if we look at the landscape right now, there's a lot of funnels and different strategies and tactics out there to drive the most leads and the most sales for your business, and how to drive, 50 appointments per week. And a lot of those work, but tactics only last so long, right? And if we look at that example that we talked about here, like, this is a funnel, right? This is more of an ecosystem up here, right? Like, this is not a, straight line process that converts a customer. However, it's more of a kind of flywheel, to put it in better words, right? And a flywheel keeps growing as long as you fuel it. A funnel, on the other hand, usually, again, if it's outdated and it's something that looks like this that everyone else is using, is going to be very hard for you to keep scaling that to stand out in the market and in your marketing or sales, right? So how do you build flywheels? Or let's talk about flywheels a little bit more. So back to that example that I just mentioned, a flywheel is something simple as this, right? A customer buys something, right? They become really happy. They buy something again from you. They get even happier, and then they buy something bigger, right? That's a flywheel. A funnel is usually a dead end. It's not going to get you to probably reach the end goal, because most of the time when we look at a funnel like this, and I'll explain each one in a second, what's happening right now in the market is a lot of leads are coming in here. And what most people try to do through a funnel is they try to rush them down to the bottom of the funnel and close, but they miss a lot of the middle steps over here, right? And again, in the other market from 2020 to 2023, that was possible, and it was a lot easier to do because there was less friction. However, in this market, it's much harder to take someone from a YouTube subscriber or a lead and converting them into a high ticket sale. It usually takes a lot longer of a conversion cycle. Now, how do you reduce that conversion cycle? Well, it's that middle part over here that we'll talk about in just a second, right? But the point we're trying to make here is that overall, funnels will be part of your ecosystem, but relying on one funnel alone is not the healthiest way to scale to a really dominant level. Now, flywheels basically consist of a lot of funnels in between them that make sure you can keep getting to the bigger goal, right? And I'll cross over to here a bit and define this a little bit more, right? There's different stages within a funnel, and this is the more in-depth version rather than just top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. Let's define all of those terms, right? Top of the funnel is usually when someone comes in from, either a paid traffic source or your organic socials, whatever it might be. It's just your traffic source, right? A lead is basically someone that gives you their name, email, and phone number, right? That's usually a lead. They give you their contact information. A market qualified lead is usually someone that gives you all of this, plus they probably filled out some sort of application or survey or quiz or something that gives you a little bit more information about who this person is. Which one of the ICPs does this person fall into, right? Then you have product qualified leads. Product qualified leads is someone that gives you all of the above, plus gave you their credit card information and purchased something from your ecosystem, right? And we'll talk about the different level of products within your ecosystem and how to structure it to drive the most qualified leads to your business. But these are going to be the ones that usually are going to cut down that conversion time from top of the funnel, right? Where if someone doesn't purchase something in the middle process here, again, it's probably going to take a lot longer for that lead to convert, right? Whereas if someone does purchase something, that'll cut down and reduce the time it takes for someone to purchase the higher ticket, program or whatever service you guys offer, right? But basically product qualified comes down to them just purchasing something from you. That's maybe on the more low ticket side. Clients is something where, again, these two are going to be varied depending on how your business is, but sometimes people have clients in their programs. And this is what we can consider our high ticket. And then usually there's probably, for some businesses, maybe more exclusive membership type of programs where there's in-person events or retreats or customization, such as like the one-on-one services and stuff like that, which is probably going to be the more expensive stuff over here. And this is still expensive, but relative to this, it's going to be a little lower, right? But usually, if we skip this step over here, which a lot of businesses were doing a few years ago, if you skip that step, that conversion time is just going to keep increasing, or at least stay the same. It's not going to decrease. And we'll talk about those ecosystems and products in just a second, but that's the definitions of the different stages of the flow, right? Now that we have a good idea about what a flywheel is and how a funnel is structured and how these funnels play a role inside of the flywheel, we'll go to the next thing, right? We'll talk a little bit about buyer psychology. And this ties back into, how this marketing works here, is that every human being purchases differently, right? For example, if you have a room of 10 or 30 people and you ask each person how long it takes them to buy one product, and it could be the same product, everyone is going to have a different answer. Some people like to take their sweet time. They like to read the product description. They like to go on Amazon and read every single review before they purchase something. Other people are more impulsive and they'll probably buy it right away because it hits home with them, right? So every person individually has a different buying psychology. What you need to do as a business and what your marketing up here needs to do is meet them in the middle intersection of when they're ready to buy. And the main purpose of your marketing, if we look at, let's just say this is our marketing lever and this is our sales lever, marketing should tell us who it is that we're selling to, and sales should be the part that's converting them, right? And when you know who you're selling to and who exactly this avatar of a person is, you can fit them into whatever product or ecosystem you have inside of your business, right? Whether it's your low ticket product, mid ticket, high ticket, whatever it might be. Now, your sales process intersects and communicates with your marketing in order to meet them in that intersection when they're ready to purchase. So it's your job using data, your marketing, your sales to identify that one moment. And that's usually when they'll probably book the call, or they'll probably, jump on a conversation with your sales team to find out more about what you have to offer, right? And so you're preparing for a lot of that moment. And so if we look at the funnel in more of a horizontal way, the way that the funnel is structured is that there's a nurturing state. This is where the state where if someone's on this end of the spectrum, chances of them buying is very low. Trust is intersected somewhere in the middle, where if they purchased, if they're a product qualified lead, they're probably going to end up here. And so that's the middle ground, similar to this intersection, that can determine if they move forward into the close or the buyer's pocket, if you want to say. Now, here's the other thing. Here's the caveat. If your product over here, let's just say the low ticket, is not as great and it's not able to deliver this and a happy satisfaction score, the inverted thing can happen where the trust is going backwards. And so as much as it is that you can dish out a low ticket product to try to qualify someone, if the product does not live up to its promise or it under delivers, the opposite thing can happen. So this is a double-edged sword if done incorrectly, right? Now, if the product is great, however, the chances of them moving into the buyer's pocket is a lot more likely, right? And I'll talk about this and I'll come back to this and explain this in 1 second, but I want to talk about the different ecosystems that you can have for these funnels, right? And this is talking a little bit more about the different kind of scopes of products that you can have for your business to try to drive those product qualified leads, right? So there's 4 kind of angles or spectrums to this, right? There's the front end structure, there's the back end structure. Then there's recurring and static, which is static just means more one time. Recurring is more monthly recurring revenue if you have a product that fits that, right? Now, when we look at the front end, when someone discovers you and they just found out about you, trying to sell them into the high ticket back end products is going to be, again, pretty hard to do, right? It's that same thing about taking a lead from here into the high ticket mark, right? Now, the one thing I want to preface, by the way, is if you have a funnel, I'm not saying this thing doesn't work to try to convert someone here. It does work. However, most of the time, what usually happens is most brands have this pent up demand already at the bottom of the funnel. So when you launch a program, you're going to basically liquidate that pretty fast. And your well is going to dry up because you're probably going to close most of those deals or those leads. And you're not going to have many leads to follow up with the next month or maybe in the next 2 months. And usually what happens is that downward cycle starts, right? And that's where you have to, sometimes you'll do a webinar, get that spike back up, but then you're back down to square one. You post a YouTube video, you can get a little bit more spiked in terms of lead flow. However, the thing is, when people are stuck up here in the middle, they're going to take their time, again, to build trust with you. And that's going to come through 2 ways. Either they're going to spend more time in the ecosystem, consuming your content, learning more about you, or they're going to spend money with you and you're earning their trust in that fashion. Now, again, this process works. The problem is you're eventually going to run out of that bottom of the funnel demand that you have. And that's where you want to prepare for the future. And a lot of this system is designed for you to make sure that you can take these people that are stuck up here in the middle process for most companies and convert them a lot easily and more efficiently to the bottom of the funnel. So that's the main thing I want to address there. Now, how do you do that? The middle process here consists of you having more front-end products, right? Or programs. And I'll explain the differential in a second, but anything that's below here is probably really expensive. So any private customized access type of thing, that's not something you'll probably want to have listed on a landing page to sell someone to, right? Same thing with like a high ticket program that probably is priced anywhere from maybe like the 5 to 10K range, right? That's where that scope would fall into. And something more private and customized might be 20 to 30K plus, right? And again, this depends on what your business is, what your niche is. If you're B2C, if you're B2B, it's going to depend for everyone. However, the thing is, these are back-end services that you're probably going to sell through a sales process. You're not going to have them stuck up at the front of your homepage of your website or your landing page. However, you can drive traffic to a landing page where you're offering more products, right? And a product could be, for example, an ebook that you could price at maybe $7, right? It could be maybe a challenge event or webinar that you're doing that you'll probably maybe charge anywhere from $27 to maybe $50, right? And it again ranges on your industry, your ICP, and your niche in general of like the way these things are priced. But these are entry level products that will reduce how long it takes someone to convert. Now, for example, for one of the businesses that we were partnered with, we learned that for an average of every $100 someone spent, that reduced about 60 to 90 days on average off of their customer journey, right? And so the more we can get someone to spend on the front end with us, and again, if we can deliver on our products and we can make them really great, they'll be much more suited to kind of buy our next back end product. Now, if we look at this spectrum here, you can have these products as like a one-time thing, or you can have something that's maybe a little bit more recurring. This is a more harder thing to have, right? So if you have like a monthly subscription and someone's paying you month over month, that's the harder product to kind of grow. However, hard doesn't always mean bad. Hard also means if you can keep the retention great enough, that means you have a good quality audience that's purchasing from you there, right? However, if your churn is pretty bad, that's going to be something that's going to be a product issue that you'll need to fix. One-time payments are less friction to people because it's not going to be a charge on their credit card every single month. So there's less fear, there's less objections when it comes to buying a static one-time product in general, right? So usually, and it depends on who you are as a business, but we've noticed that some businesses have anywhere from maybe 5 to 10 to even 15 front-end products. And all those different products are designed for them to build trust over and over and over again with the ideal customer. Now, once that trust is built, the goal is, again, meeting them at the intersection, right? Because you marketed them those products. The sales process is also in position as well. When that person is ready and qualified, that's where your phone setting team can come into place, qualify them, book them onto the calendar for the sales team. And that's going to be a more effective process in the long run to convert rather than jumping on a sales call with a lead that, really isn't that qualified or just submitted an application. Again, it can work and it does work for a lot of businesses, but that conversion time is going to take up a lot of time in general, right? To get them to buy the high ticket program. So that's the different structures of programs. And I'll touch on programs here a bit as well. Programs here just means it's more of a mid-ticket item where it's probably less than $997. Anything above that will kind of fall into this bracket and this bucket down here. But anything below this would fall into a front-end product where you can still list a $997 product on the landing page and you can have people to purchase that. Now, obviously, the more they spend with you up front and the better experience they have, the faster you can get them to buy the next stage. So that's the more moral of the story with how to use this funnel and equip it with the different front-end products you have here. However, you're tying it into this flywheel that can constantly generate you proper qualified lead flow without having to, push, do heavy pushing on your Instagram or YouTube, and just making those call to actions that really just force those direct people that are at the bottom of the funnel to convert, right? Now, I want to tie this back into this over here, and that horizontal graph, right? And this kind of demonstrates more so of where someone is on their buyer's journey and where the different products and ecosystems can kick in, right? So if someone is on this stage of not purchasing, they have zero trust with you, they just found out about you yesterday, chances of that person purchasing something really high ticket from you or at a high ticket price range is going to be pretty slim, right? Probably 1 to 3% of those people will buy that right off the bat. We obviously want to get that percentage higher. Now, how do we do that? Again, this is where the products, these things over here, will kick into play, right? So maybe they start with the newsletter, they start with your content, they slowly buy maybe your ebook, maybe they buy one of your webinar challenges that you have coming up, whatever your product structures are. Once you define them, you can start by introducing them and getting them closer to that trust kind of middle ground, right? And once they're here and they've been through probably and for some people, one product is enough, right? And I also want to clarify, this doesn't mean that you go out and you create like 14 different products on the low ticket side to try to get people closer to the buyer's pocket. That's something you definitely don't want to do. You start with one low ticket product and you nail it and you try to really dial in those numbers and KPIs And until that's proven, then you can move on to the second one, if it's even necessary, right? Some businesses it is, some businesses it really isn't. But that's going to require more marketing work to try to maintain those products, quality, and all of that stuff, right? But one great low ticket product beats 5 okay low ticket products, right? So whatever your structure is, that's going to be dictated based on who you are and what your niche is and all of those factors, right? However, once these people buy this and they get closer to that trust level here and they have that trust, getting them into the buyer's pocket, this is where you can sell them the more high ticket or higher up customized services that you have here, right? And so that's the main kind of concept that I wanted to share. Now, to kind of summarize all of this, the main question that we started this video with is like, how do you never run out of constant lead flow? Now, if you install and implement a lot of these structures that we've dove into here today, the main thing you want to keep in mind is that you always want your marketing to be 1 quarter ahead of schedule, right? Or even more if you guys can, but that requires a lot of planning and execution depending on how well you can do that. So usually what you want to do is if you have a low ticket product that's working, right? Or even if you're launching a new product, for example, I'll take this scenario because I usually deal with this a lot with calls and brands and businesses. They're trying to launch a new product, right? Or a new high ticket offer. Rather than going straight to market with it and selling it to the public right away, doing that will blow your gasket really quickly, right? The same thing that we discussed up here is going to happen where you launch it, you have this spike of revenue and everything's amazing, right? But then you notice you try to do the same thing again, you don't have as much demand by the second month, right? You try to do some sort of video or webinar or some sort of challenge to get those sales up. Maybe you can climb back to that same level. But usually what happens is because you rush to market too fast with this, especially if you have an organic brand, what you'll do is you'll just dry up that well. You don't have any leads in the pipeline anymore. And being in that position is, pretty scary to be in because you have to now, if you have a sales team, have to make sure you can drive enough lead flow for them to, reach their goals, for you to reach your goals. And if you can't supply that, that's where a lot of the things start to break in the company. And that's where a lot of those desperate measures by a lot of business owners come into play. So instead, what you want to do is if you have a low ticket ecosystem or an internal backend, some sort of ecosystem, maybe it's even just a private community that you have that's for free, right? You can start with the backend structure where you can start selling people that are part of your, private, low ticket, whatever product section on the front end here. And you only want to take it to them because this will do 2 things. A, this will make sure that you nail the proof of concept. It'll also make sure that you can nail the delivery and fulfillment. And it'll also educate you a little bit more about your ICP and who you're selling to, right? And so it accomplishes a lot of other things because you can control the business when it's small. And the minute you start scaling and you go wide, there's a lot more things that can break. There's a lot more management that you need to have in place to control it. And that's where things kind of spiral out for a lot of people. But when you're selling internally, what that does to the public, and you showcase to the public that you do have some sort of back-end product, but it's not available to the public, it creates this demand because it truly isn't, available for someone from the public to just walk in and buy this thing. You have to be part of our ecosystem. So that drives more demand than the average kind of competitor or person in your space will be doing, right? And so basically, you want to maximize on the back end as much as you can and build up your pipeline on the front end as much as you can as well. Now, what that will do is you'll probably be able to scale, maybe to a 6-figure per month mark, let's just say, for example, internally. And that might last you that lead flow here that's at the bottom of the funnel because these people are already in your community. They have a lot more trust with you. They're more so already in the buyer's pocket already or getting close to the buyer's pocket. That might sustain you depending on how much volume you have, maybe for 30, 60, or 90 days, right? That's going to be depending on, again, how many leads you have in your ecosystem. But that can sustain you for almost maybe close to a couple months or a quarter, right? Now, while you're selling on the back end of this, you can then build up the public demand and that you can have basically a wait list. While you were selling on the back end here, you're building up a wait list for people to join and learn more about what you're actually doing on the back end. Now, it's not like these people bought any product from you yet, or maybe some of them have, which is, again, if they bought a product from you, they're going to be closer to this buyer's pocket over here. If they haven't, they might be on this middle phase where they have trust with you, or they might be closer to this direction here, right? But the better your marketing is, the more closer you can get them into the buyer's pocket. Now, when you are basically, let's just say you've converted people that were at the bottom of the funnel, and now you're out of the pipeline here, the next quarter, you can tap into that public lead flow that you've built up here, and you already have a pipeline to tap into. So the way I like to look at it is we like to always be 1 quarter in advance of our marketing and making sure that we never have to, live off a month-to-month structure where we have to climb for leads every single month and make desperate moves for the business to get there, right? So usually what we'll start doing is, if it's Q1, we'll start planning the marketing for Q2, because it's the stuff that you plant over here that isn't going to show the results right away, but it's going to come into play maybe Q2 or Q3, right? An example of this is, for example, maybe you do a 3-day challenge event, but instead of launching it within the same quarter or within the same month, you give it enough runway to sustain, because usually it's the thing that you don't need right away that you want to work on, because it'll compound later, right? If you plant the seeds for that in this quarter, it's not like you need that event or webinar to happen in this quarter, because you already have the back-end leads, you already have the public leads that will sustain you for maybe, a couple months or a quarter. And so you're basically preparing for Q2, because when you kind of run out of this runway, you don't want to be asking yourself, well, now what? So in Q2, you'll be prepared because you'll be doing that challenge event. That's going to give you guys a boost of more lead flow, and you guys are more prepared. Same thing for Q3, right? You can have another kind of marketing promotion or some sort of event or campaign going on for this quarter that'll help you drive enough lead flow. Maybe it's as simple as you guys building a phone setter team in Q2, so you guys can make sure Q3, you guys all need to do is just follow up with all that lead flow from Q1 and Q2. Again, this is all going to be very tailored and customized to who you are and what you are selling and who you're selling it to. But the moral of the story is, if you implement all of the above and you use it correctly and you space out the timeline of your marketing, you won't have to suffer from that syndrome of having to, crawl and scrape the bottom of the barrel every single month to get enough lead flow to just barely scratch the surface for 6 figures a month, right? So having systems like that is what's going to take the business from, being anywhere from 100 to 300K per month to jumping from that to the $500,000 to $1 million per month marks, right? But these are, again, deeper concepts that I'll probably go into further in the other videos. But that's mainly it. If you guys enjoyed this, just, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video.